Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Mic check, 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Welcome to Farmier Daily, a field-forward podcast. I'm David Geiger, your host. I've been on Iowa TV and radio for the last decade, and I'm very excited to start up this podcast, Farm Here Daily. Today on the program, we'll take a look at the spring conference of the U.S. Meat Export Federation with its CEO, Dan Halstrom, and learn more about efforts to sell Iowa's meat products. Then we'll have a glance at Eastern Iowa's crop emergence with agronomist Rebecca Vittetoe. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community to help keep folks in Iowa informed about what is affecting our Iowa farmers. And joining us on Farm Here Daily, we have Dan Halstrom, CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Dan, always happy to talk to you and the folks over there, and the work you guys are doing to keep our meat exports flowing around the world. Tell me, what are you guys doing right now? You have a spring conference going on?
We are in Fort Worth, Texas. Our spring conference runs a little bit later this week, Wednesday through Friday, and we will have not only close to 300 attendees, membership attendees from throughout the U.S., but we'll also have about 20 of our international staff as part of the conference as well. So bringing that reality of the market back to our meeting is always one of the highlights with our membership.
What are some of the top topics you guys are looking at this time of year?
Well, we're looking at the base trend lines on, our mission, which is to increase the export opportunity on beef, pork, and lamb globally, right? And we've had some pretty good numbers. 2024 record year for pork on both volume and value. And the beef side, while not a record, was close, third highest year ever on export value. So we're exporting over $19 billion a year globally. And that's in the face of a lot of headwinds. We got a lot of issues going on out there, a lot of tariff talk, a lot of reciprocal agreements that are in the process of being negotiated now, which hopefully will work to our advantage. But as you know well, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I think the performance last year and into the first quarter of this year, and really the trend lines are the same. The first quarter of this year, we're basically steady with a year ago on pork, which, as I said, was a record year, and on beef, we're up a couple percent on the value. So all in all, I'd say we're pretty happy with those numbers, but we got to keep pushing forward.
Just as a quick dip into that topic of our record exports, I know, for example, we have a pretty small cattle herd, historically small cattle herd. How are we keeping up that high export product when we're having a dwindling supply?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something actually we've been focused on for almost 3 years now, knowing that the cycle, takes a while, right? So it's really no surprise to our customers globally that we have less cattle. So what we've been, one of the keys that we've been focused on, like I said, for probably up to 3 years now is, an example of one of the most commonly exported items would be a short plate, right? And, there's X amount of short plates when you have less cattle. So knowing this was coming, we've been really focused on utilizing that carcass. So there's several other areas of the carcass that we've really disproportionately focused on, and the round is one of them. Outside rounds, outside round flats, inside rounds, knuckles. These are items that weren't so commonly exported. They were to a few countries, Latin America in particular, Mexico, Central America, and a little bit to Canada. But Asia, it was a foreign topic. They didn't know what to do with them. So we've been doing a lot of work on the round, for example. Taiwan, Korea, they do a lot of business today on outside round flats and inside rounds that they never had done before. So this is one of, if there's a benefit to having less cattle, of course, we'd all like to have more cattle for purposes of marketing and exporting. But the fact that we have less, everyone understands that, and they're willing to look at options. That's one of our jobs, is to bring options to the trade in these foreign countries. And rounds are just one example. Another one would be shoulder clods from the chuck. You chuck tenders, versus the traditional tender. The list goes on. Variety meats is another really good example. Maximizing the use of intestines and tongues and tripe, this sort of thing.
I was just about to mention variety meats with you talking about knuckle and some of the other parts of the carcass, because that's been something for the last 12 years that I've been doing farm broadcasting. At least in the last, I think, 5 to 8, that's been something really emphasized by exporters, is getting those variety meats that we don't like or use here to places that do like and use it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about putting one of our submissions, I would call it, is putting a right cut in a right market to maximize the value, right? So a lot of that's cultural. You look at the Latin American countries, Mexico, Central America, Colombia, they're big users of tripe. And there's, all sorts of different sorts of tripe. Different countries prefer different stomachs from the cow, and pork stomachs as well are popular. So, that's not something that's all that commonly consumed. It is a little bit in the South, in the southern part of the U.S., but, maximizing that to the cultures around the world. Beef tongue's another really good example. A chilled beef tongue brings well over $10 a pound into Japan.
Wow.
And that's for a barbecue, yakiniku. It's usually the first, like an appetizer in the yakiniku dinner set. And it's not new. I mean, I remember selling beef tongue in the 80s and 90s to Japan, and it's still a culinary specialty today. But this is what the exporters do. You got to maximize that whole value of the carcass, including those parts that maybe aren't consumed so much in the U.S.
Just as a personal example, when I was a young teen, I used to live in Brazil, and their chicken heart was a huge delicacy. People loved chicken heart there, and I had never even seen it. I personally still am not a huge fan of chicken heart in terms of texture, but I know that there's a lot of places that enjoy that, and cow tongue, another thing that's enjoyed. It just needs to be in the right place.
Exactly right. And one item we haven't talked about is the largest yielding item besides the intestine is liver, beef liver, pork liver. We're doing a lot of work in Africa, places like Angola, South Africa, Ghana, and it's a very affordable source of nutrients, of protein and nutrients, right? Very healthy, and it sounds pretty basic, but putting something that like a liver that's on a per pound basis, very attractively priced and a very good source of nutrition. Some of the marketing is just that simple, and it's really caught on. So, exporting a larger percentage of our livers at a higher price is adding value to that carcass as well.
We're speaking with CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, Dan Halstrom. Dan, I want to return a little bit to the spring conference that you guys are doing over there in Fort Worth, Texas later this week, and talk a little about some of the barriers of trade that you're facing. Is that one of the primary issues you're speaking about as well?
Well, it is. They kind of go hand in hand, right? I mentioned earlier that last year we were over $19 billion in global sales. And we're not the only country that's figured out that export provides another value opportunity to increase value, right? Our competitors globally are all well aware of that, and everyone's kind of clamoring to do more globally. Why? Because it adds value. So that's the positive news. The negative is that some of the countries might use it as a non-tariff trade issue of some sort. We have a lot of we don't have perfect access in a lot of these markets. We have some access or the majority of the access, but not full access. Some markets we do, but there's a lot that have opportunities. So yes, most definitely this is something we're talking about. And I'll give you a good example. We are basically have very little access into Southeast Asia, into some of these countries. And one example might be Indonesia, where we're doing good business there, but it could be so much larger. And a lot of this kind of rotates around the way the halal definition is enforced with a place like Indonesia. So that's one topic that's very top of mind. And another one, of course, is what's going on with China. China in 2024, you add beef and pork together, and it's not our largest market, nor do we want it to be our largest market. We want to stay diversified from a country standpoint. But it's still 15% of our exports. So what we've seen in the last 3 months on a tariff standpoint is that beef tariffs, U.S. beef into China, the tariff paid on U.S. beef went from 12% to 147%, and now we're at 32%, all in a matter of about 60 days. So that's quite a bit of volatility. And you look at the pork side, earlier this year, we were at 37%, then we went to 172%, and as of a week ago, we're back to 57%. So the trend line's in the right direction, but it's not perfect access. The other access issue on the beef side that we're dealing with is that the China side plant registration list has not updated the majority of U.S. beef plants. So it doesn't even matter what your tariff is if your plants aren't approved. So these are some things that are very much top of mind, very much on the radar of USDA and USTR, and negotiations and discussions are ongoing, but something that we'll really be focused on here at the conference later this week.
Dan, one last question before I let you go, a bit more pertinent to Iowa. As I'm sure you know, Iowa produces a third of the nation's pork supplies, and so it's a big deal here. Can we talk about what you would think is the next big thing to promote pork and export it across the world?
Well, I think number one, look at it two different ways. The first part is that this momentum that we've had last year with the records, it's really about broad-based growth through many different markets, right? Latin America, Mexico in particular, Central America, Colombia led the way. But, Japan, Korea, you look at Philippines, you look at places like Australia, New Zealand on ham raw material. It takes all of them hitting on all cylinders at all the time to really drive that value. And you look at the value per head in the month of March, the latest export stats that we just had, almost $74 a head attributable to exports of every animal pig slaughtered. So that on the one hand is continuing that momentum is one thought that we have. And another is to continue to develop these emerging markets, the Central Americas of the world, the Colombias of the world, the Southeast Asias, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia is another one last year that really took off. And, maximizing the value of that carcass, not only in established markets, but in the emerging markets as well.
Dan Halstrom, CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, joining us today. Thank you so much for your time on Farm Here Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs, but luckily there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
You are listening to Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast, and we're going to take a look at the marketplace at the Monday market close. There was some green on the board in grain, starting off in corn. July up 4 cents, 447.5. September rising 6 3/4 at 428 1/4. Soybeans in July 3/4 of a penny higher at 10.50 3/4, with August rising a penny and a half at 10.47 3/4. Soybean meal in July down 80 cents a ton at $291.10. July wheat up 4 cents at $5.29, with September rising 4 cents as well, $5.43. In the livestock market close for Monday, some mixed trading going on there. June live cattle up 75 cents a hundredweight, $212.97 a hundredweight. August rising $1.17 at $207.92. Feeder cattle in May, $1.17 weaker at $295.67, with August down 12 cents at $297.47. In lean hogs, June down $1.07 a hundredweight at $99.25, with July falling 60 cents at $103.57. That is the Monday market close. You are listening to the Farm Here Daily podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And joining us again here on Farm Here Daily, we have Rebecca Vittetoe, East Iowa State University Extension agronomist, joining us. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. And let's go over the conditions in your area. Planting's all but wrapped up, and Emergence is happening. What's that looking like?
Yeah, so in general, Emergence is looking pretty good. A lot of that stuff, especially planted the first part of April, it's been up for quite a while. Some of the farthest along corn plants I've seen are kind of in that V4, almost to that V5 stage. And soybeans, some of that were planted earlier in April, for sure at VC. Some are probably getting close to that V1 stage too. We have been seeing a few emergence issues with some soybeans that were planted kind of around Easter weekend or right before we had that heavy rain on Easter. And just seeing some crusting issues and trouble with those beans coming up through that soil crust. So I know a lot of people have been out doing stand counts if they had fields planted around then, trying to decide, do we need to do something additional in those fields? I think a lot of people were maybe going to wait and see what the rain did this week here, if it maybe brought a few more, if maybe we need to go back in and spot in a few beans as well.
How much rain have you guys gotten over in that area?
So it rained here this morning. The sun came out here this afternoon, but we've got rain chances. I think when I looked earlier, it was 100% for tomorrow, and then rain chances on Wednesday as well. So I think they said for this week we could see almost 3 inches of rain. So we'll see if their predictions are right, what they tell us on what we could see total for rain this week.
Now I know 3 inches all at once versus 3 inches over a time span can make a pretty big difference, but are there any concerns of ponding or any other water-related problems as that comes in?
I think it just depends upon how quick and how hard that rain comes. Like you said, if we get 3 inches over 3 days, nice and slow, less of a concern compared to if I get an inch and a half in a matter of 45 minutes. So obviously something we're kind of keeping on our radar, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the weather brings. But we were wet, and then we were dry. We were thankfully at a dry spell, so we were able to get back in the field and finish up planting in a timely fashion. But I think a lot of people are thankful for this rain now, especially with some of that stuff that was planted last week. Herbicides put down when the wind wasn't too windy last week, just to kind of get some of those pre's activated. That was kind of a concern there last week as well.
Rebecca, you are in the east central portion of Iowa, and I know there were some current concerns even further to the east of you of cutworm flights. We've gotten a couple significant flights here in Iowa, I know of. Have you guys seen much more activity in the last couple of weeks there?
So in terms of moth activity with our trapping network that we have started to see a decline on that, less activity last week and then again just this past week. We'll continue to monitor that though until the end of May. And then as far as actual larvae activity, I have yet to personally see a black cutworm or a true armyworm larvae, but there have been some plants and fields that I've been in that I've questioned that it looks like more so black cutworm larvae feeding, where the larvae aren't quite big enough to necessarily cut the plants, but the feeding that I see on some of the plants resemble what I would expect with a black cutworm larvae before they can cut plants. So seeing a little activity. I know my counterpart to kind of the west and south of me that covers more south central Iowa. He did mention this weekend he saw some cut plants, assuming cutworms. So definitely seeing some activity, not necessarily a ton, but something to keep an eye out for as you're out scouting fields and checking on your stands.
What are the calls you're fielding right now from our farmers in Iowa in your area?
Yeah, so a lot of the calls in the last week or so have been on the crop side of things around weed identification or concerns on herbicide, whether it's stuff, are we getting our pre's activated with how dry we were if they went down just last week, or people seeing weeds coming through their herbicides that were already down on some of the earlier stuff and thinking about those post applications. Were a lot of the questions last week on the row crop side of things. Also getting on the forage side of things, questions about like alfalfa weevil larvae. Seeing a little activity on that, nothing compared to what I saw last spring regarding alfalfa weevil larvae activity. But something people just, I think we have PTSD from last spring with what we saw in some fields. So just kind of keeping an eye on that, thinking about taking that first cutting. We have seen a few fields already harvested for that first cutting, which usually we kind of think of Memorial Day weekend as being kind of when we typically make that first cutting as a very general rule of thumb. But just the way the spring's been going, there are some fields that people already ended up harvesting them just because we've seen that growth and they were ready to be harvested.
Rebecca, can you tell me a little bit more about some of that pre-emergent herbicide activation as well as some of the weeds you've been seeing out in the fields?
Yeah, so as far as like pre's that were recently put on, and we got some right now that should help to activate them. We might also see some more weeds, but that should help to control weeds that have not germinated. Now, obviously, in some of the fields that were planted earlier, where we had pre's already applied, and we're starting to see weeds coming through those pre's, that's something to kind of pay attention to as we think about when we're going to do that post application. We also have to think too about our crop size and double check to make sure that we're on label based off of that crop size as well. But paying attention to weed size, some of the water hemp that I've seen in fields is, getting to be that 3, maybe even 4 inches tall in some places, which if you look at a lot of our herbicide labels, it's going to say that it's going to control water hemp the best if it's less than, 4 inches tall. Always double check the herbicide label, but paying attention to that weed size, I think we're going to want to be try to get out there after we get through this wet period to get some of those post applications on before the weeds get too big, and also paying attention to our crop stages as well.
Speaking of paying attention to things, what are you looking at as we move forward over the next couple of weeks in your area? What are the things you're going to be watching specifically?
I think as we, look forward, is the stuff that was planted last, just kind of keeping an eye on the emergence of that stuff as it starts to emerge. And then obviously the weeds that I mentioned is one to kind of keep an eye on in fields and be as timely as we can with those post herbicide applications. On the insect side of things, keep scouting for black cutworm and true armyworm here for a little bit. yet. We could still potentially see some activity with that, with both of those pests right now. But then as we kind of get into June, that's also when we start to think about like corn rootworm larvae hatching. We could start to see thinking about Japanese beetles, other potential issues like that as well. So I feel like there's no shortage of things to look for. And then also too, when we start to get into some of those post herbicide applications, sometimes you'll get called out to, weird things that happened in fields related to that as well. So lots of things to kind of keep looking at and seeing how things are going out in the fields.
Rebecca Vittetoe, Iowa State University Extension agronomist for East Central Iowa. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Farm Here Daily.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for listening to us on Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Again, in order to continue producing this type of local Iowa content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward. Additionally, you can find me on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as WHO TV Channel 13 every weekday in their morning and noon hour programs. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and we'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.